The morning began like any other in the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, a town known more for its well-kept parks than its political scandals. Sunlight filtered through red oak branches, dappling the sidewalks where early joggers passed each other with slow nods. It was a peaceful place, the kind of neighborhood where people remembered each other's birthdays and still borrowed sugar without hesitation. Among the residents was David Morales, a retired Marine and decorated veteran. David had lost his left leg during a rescue operation overseas. After years of physical therapy, he learned to walk with a prosthetic limb. Despite chronic pain and restless nights, he remained one of the town's most respected figures. His neighbors admired him not only for his service but for his humility. He rarely spoke about his military past unless someone asked, and even then, he gave credit to everyone but himself. That morning, David stopped by a local grocery store to buy dog treats for Ranger, his German Shepherd service dog. Ranger walked beside him with the calm discipline of a trained companion, his vest reading service animal, "Do not distract." Inside the store, David picked up a few items and made his way to the checkout. Everything seemed ordinary until a high-pitched voice sliced through the quiet hum of conversation. "Move that mutt," the woman hissed. David turned to see a well-dressed woman in a tailored cream coat, her manicured fingers wrapped around an expensive-looking designer purse. Her face was tight with irritation, as though she'd been personally offended by the sight of Ranger. David stayed polite. "Ma'am, he's a service dog. He's allowed to be here." The woman scoffed. "I don't care what he is. I said move. I need to get through, and this dog is blocking the aisle." Ranger wasn't blocking anything. The aisle was wide enough for 2 carts, and she had more than enough space to pass. Still, David stepped a little closer to the shelf, accommodating her request even though it wasn't necessary. Instead of passing, she leaned forward, her face twisting with anger. "People like you think everyone owes you something," she spat. "What, you show up with a dog and expect special treatment?" David froze. He'd experienced ignorant comments before, but rarely something this venomous. "Ma'am, I'm not asking for anything special," he said calmly. "Just basic respect." "Oh, please." She waved him off. "You disabled types love using that word. Respect. 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 How about respecting the rest of us?" A couple nearby gasped. A cashier stopped scanning items mid-motion. But the woman didn't seem to care that all eyes were on her. Ranger shifted protectively, sensing David's rising tension. The woman's glare snapped toward the dog again. "Control your animal before I have him removed. I'll call the police myself." David's jaw clenched. This was becoming absurd. But what happened next pushed him past the point of shock. The woman reached forward as if to shove Ranger with her purse. David reacted instantly, his voice booming, "Don't touch my dog." That was when a young employee recognized the woman, whispering loudly enough for several customers to hear. "That's Elaine Harrow, the senator's wife." And suddenly, everything made sense. Elaine Harrow wasn't just any rude shopper, she was married to Senator Robert Harrow, a man often seen smiling charismatically on television, championing bills about supporting our veterans and protecting the vulnerable. Yet his wife was here threatening a disabled veteran and his service dog in the middle of a grocery store. David stared at her, stunned not by her identity, but by how openly she behaved as though she were untouchable. Elaine leaned in closer, her voice low and cutting. "You think anyone will believe you over me? I can make your life very difficult, Mr. Whoever you are." David felt something inside him harden. Maybe it was years of discipline, or maybe it was the realization that, for once, someone needed to stand up to people who believed power placed them above basic decency. He looked her squarely in the eyes and said, "My name is David Morales. And you just made a threat in front of a store full of witnesses." The woman paled slightly, but only for a moment. Then she lifted her chin defiantly. "You'll regret challenging me," she snapped, and stormed out of the store. Ranger pressed his head gently against David's hand. The store manager approached cautiously. "David, we got everything on the security cameras. If you want to file a report, we'll back you up." For years, David avoided unnecessary confrontation. But this time, he knew backing down would send a message that people like Elaine Harrow could bully anyone without consequences. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think it's time someone stood up to her." He didn't know then how far this would go, or that it would eventually land in front of Judge Judy herself. The confrontation at the grocery store became the talk of Willow Creek before David even made it home. Normally, he enjoyed the quiet walk along Maple Ridge Lane, ranger's leash in hand, the crisp air carrying the scent of pine and freshly cut grass. But that day his pocket vibrated nonstop, a constant stream of calls and messages he didn't have the energy to answer. He couldn't shake the sting of Elaine Harrow's words, the way she had spoken to him as if he were beneath her, as if his disability somehow made him a burden instead of a human being. Once inside, he hung Ranger's vest on its hook and sank onto the couch. Ranger pressed himself against David's leg, resting his head gently on David's lap, sensing his unease with the intuition only a service dog possesses. David finally listened to a voicemail from the store manager, Tyler, who sounded frantic. "Turn on Channel 7 News. Just do it." The urgency in his voice concerned David enough to reach for the remote. The moment the picture came into focus, he froze. A live news segment was already covering the incident. The reporter stood outside Willow Creek Market, gesturing animatedly as store footage displayed in the corner of the screen. There was Elaine, her immaculate cream coat unmistakable, leaning forward, yelling, gesturing wildly. And there he was, standing calmly, Ranger obedient beside him. The audio of the store footage was muted, but the body language was impossible to misinterpret. Customers watching, mouths open. Elaine leaning toward Ranger, purse raised. David stepping back, clearly uncomfortable. The entire town could now see everything that had happened. The reporter's voice filled the living room. Witnesses claimed the senator's wife verbally harassed the disabled veteran and his service dog before making what many describe as a series of threats. David rubbed his forehead. His stomach twisted in knots, not from shame, but from disbelief. All he had wanted was to buy dog treats. Now his life was being dissected on the evening news. The Harrow family wasted no time responding. Within hours, a statement from Senator Harrow's office appeared online. It was the kind of polished, carefully sanitized message political teams released whenever someone powerful misbehaved. They referred to the incident as a misunderstanding, apologizing vaguely to anyone who felt affected. A misunderstanding. David felt a bitter laugh bubble in his throat. How could anyone misunderstand what the cameras had shown? But he knew how the powerful operated. They used soft words and strenuous phrasing to hide ugly truths. His phone continued vibrating. Messages from old military buddies filled his voicemail. His former platoon sergeant left a gruff message, "Dave. I saw it. We're behind you. Tell us what you need. No one talks to our guys like that." He paced his living room, torn between wanting the whole thing to disappear and wanting justice, not just for himself but for every veteran or disabled individual who had been mistreated by someone drunk on status. Online, strangers came to his defense. The video uploaded by a grocery store employee exploded across social media within hours. People who'd never met him posted their outrage. #StandWithDavid began trending nationwide. Veterans groups issued statements condemning Elaine's behavior. Service dog organizations called for accountability. Yet even with the overwhelming support, not all the attention was positive. There were comments accusing him of milking the situation or trying to ruin a public servant's family. It amazed him how some people defended Elaine simply because of who she was married to. He tried not to let it get to him, but the noise was impossible to escape. 3 days after the incident, a sleek black sedan rolled into his driveway. 2 men in expensive suits stepped out. Ranger stiffened immediately, his instincts sharp. The taller man held up a badge. "Mr. Morales, we're representatives of the Harrow family. Mrs. Harrow is prepared to offer a private apology to resolve this unfortunate situation." David folded his arms across his chest. "Private?" The shorter man forced a polite, strained smile. Given the sensitive nature of your circumstances, we feel a private conversation would be more appropriate and dignified for all parties involved. So she insults me in public, David said carefully, but apologizing in public is too undignified for her? Mr. Morales, the tall man said, his tone tightening, this situation has escalated dramatically on social media. A private apology could help everyone move on. David didn't hesitate. No. If she wants to apologize, she can do it publicly. Just like the way she threatened me publicly. The men exchanged looks of irritation before retreating to their car. Neither said goodbye. The moment the door closed behind them, Ranger wagged softly, pressing against David's leg. We're not letting them sweep this under the rug, David murmured, scratching behind Ranger's ear. But things only escalated further. A video surfaced the next morning taken by a diner patron outside a restaurant. The clip showed Elaine exiting the building as reporters surrounded her. She appeared disheveled and angry, not the composed political spouse she usually presented to the world. I'm the one being attacked, she shouted. That man ambushed me in the store. His dog lunged at me, anyone would have reacted. The footage clearly contradicted her claims, but Elaine continued snapping at reporters, accusing David of orchestrating a smear campaign against her. Her publicist whispered frantically for her to stop, but she shook him off, shouting, if that veteran wants a fight, he'll get one. The nation recoiled at her words. The backlash doubled overnight. By the following afternoon, David received another call, this time from a television studio representative who spoke in an uncharacteristically excited tone. Mr. Morales, Judge Judith Scheindlin has personally reviewed your case. She would like to offer you an opportunity to appear on her program so she can hear the matter directly. David blinked in disbelief. Judge Judy was known for cutting straight through lies. She didn't play favorites. She didn't care about titles or political connections. If Elaine thought her influence could shield her, she was about to learn otherwise. He asked for time to decide, but even before he gave an answer, another news clip aired of Elaine having a public breakdown, shouting nonsensical accusations that only made things worse. Watching her unravel convinced him of one thing: this needed a neutral judge, someone who couldn't be bought, persuaded, or intimidated. He called the studio back. I'll do it, he said simply. Ranger thumped his tail, sensing David's renewed confidence. The stage was set. The nation watched closely. And the senator's wife, who had once spoken with such arrogance in a grocery store aisle, was about to face someone who would not cower, not be silenced, and definitely not tolerate excuses. That someone was Judge Judy. The studio lights were far brighter than David expected. He sat in a quiet waiting room, Ranger at his feet, the soft hum of conversations drifting through the hall. The producers had been kind, explaining how the taping would work, reassuring him that they wanted the truth presented clearly and fairly. Still, he felt a knot in his stomach. Not because he feared Judge Judy. Because he knew Elaine Harrow would be unpredictable. He had watched Judge Judy for years. He knew she didn't tolerate nonsense or theatrics. He also knew that the senator's wife, based on her public behavior, thrived on both. It was almost guaranteed she would try to twist the narrative, exaggerate, or paint herself as the victim. But Judge Judy would not be impressed by titles, privilege, or carefully practiced innocent expressions. A studio assistant approached. Mr. Morales? We'll bring you in shortly. Mrs. Harrow is already inside. Ranger lifted his head. David rubbed his ears gently. We're okay, buddy. When they led him into the courtroom set, the audience hushed. The iconic bench loomed ahead, and behind it sat Judge Judy herself, sharp-eyed, precise, and unmistakably in command of the room. Elaine Harrow stood at the defendant's podium, arms crossed tightly, lips pressed in a thin line of forced composure. She glanced at David with a mixture of annoyance and fear. He couldn't quite tell which emotion dominated, but neither seemed flattering. Judge Judy looked back and forth between them. All right, she said, her voice firm. Let's get to the point. The producer announced the case. David Morales versus Elaine Harrow. Judge Judy nodded. Mr. Morales, you may begin. Tell me what happened, briefly and clearly. David explained everything, the grocery store aisle, the insults, the attempt to shove Ranger, the threats, and the aftermath. He kept his voice level, avoiding dramatics or exaggeration. He didn't need to embellish the truth, the security footage had already done that. Judge Judy listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. She didn't interrupt him once, something she rarely granted litigants. When he finished, she turned to Elaine. Mrs. Harrow, she said, your turn. Elaine inhaled sharply, ready to launch into what was clearly a rehearsed monologue. Your Honor, this entire situation has been blown completely out of proportion. I was startled in the store because his dog. Stop, Judge Judy snapped, raising a hand. Nothing happens until I ask for it. And right now, what I want is honesty. Not a performance. Elaine blinked rapidly, caught off guard. I am being honest. We'll see, Judge Judy said coolly. Continue. Elaine restarted, but this time her tone was defensive and brittle. The dog suddenly moved toward me, and I reacted out of instinct. Anyone would have reacted. It wasn't personal. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. Instinct, you say? Yes, Elaine insisted. He lunged at me. The video doesn't show everything. A murmur rippled through the audience. Even they knew that line wasn't going to fly. Judge Judy leaned forward. Mrs. Harrow, the footage clearly shows the dog standing perfectly still. He didn't lunge. He didn't move. He didn't even look at you. Elaine's lips twitched. Videos can be misleading. Judge Judy tapped her pen sharply, the sound echoing. Not this one. Now explain something else. Why would you call a disabled veteran you people? Why would you raise your purse as if to strike his service dog? Surely you aren't suggesting the video lied about that, too? Elaine flushed, her composure cracking. I never meant to hurt anyone. I was just having a bad day. Judging by Judge Judy's expression, that was the wrong thing to say. So having a bad day gives you permission to verbally attack a veteran with a service animal? Interesting. She turned to David. Mr. Morales, were there witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. Several employees and customers stepped forward, and the store manager provided statements. And all of them corroborated your account? Yes. Judge Judy looked back at Elaine. This is not looking good for you. Elaine stiffened. I'm being targeted because of who my husband is. Judge Judy let out a sharp, humorless laugh. No, Mrs. Harrow. You're being held accountable because of what you did. This isn't political. This isn't an attack. This is consequences. The courtroom audience murmured approvingly. Elaine seemed to shrink an inch, but she hadn't surrendered yet. She flipped her hair back. I am willing to apologize if that will end this circus. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. What you offered earlier was a private apology, wasn't it? One made in the hopes of saving face. But you humiliated him publicly. You don't get to whisper an apology behind closed doors. Elaine clenched her jaw. Fine. Then I apologize. Judge Judy shook her head. That didn't sound sincere. Try again. And this time, look at him. Elaine turned toward David like a stubborn child being forced to do homework. Her voice came out stiff. I'm sorry. Judge Judy immediately cut in. That was pathetic. Do you even understand what you're apologizing for? Elaine's frustration boiled over. Why does it matter? He got the attention he wanted. Gasps filled the room. Judge Judy's face hardened. Mrs. Harrow, she said, voice low with authority, you are digging your own grave. Let me be clear, this man did not want attention. He wanted dog treats. He wanted to be left alone. He wanted your respect, something you didn't bother to give. Elaine bit her lip, eyes darting, clearly losing control of the situation. Judge Judy continued, "Your behavior was cruel, entitled, and entirely unacceptable. And trust me, I won't overlook it." She turned to David. "Mr. Morales, what outcome are you seeking?" "I don't want money," David said. "I want accountability. I want her to understand what she did, and to prevent her from mistreating someone else in the future." Judge Judy nodded approvingly. "Reasonable." She tapped her pen again, thinking. The room fell silent. Finally, she announced her decision. "Mrs. Harrow, I'm ordering you to pay a fine that will be donated directly to a veteran service dog training program. In addition, you will make a formal, public apology on record, not through your husband's office, not through a spokesperson, but yourself. And that apology will include an acknowledgement of your behavior. Not excuses." Elaine looked horrified. "A public apology? Like, online?" "Yes," Judge Judy confirmed. "Every video platform your meltdown appeared on. And that is me being generous." Elaine protested, "This will embarrass me." Judge Judy responded sharply, "Good. Maybe it will teach you humility." Then, turning toward David, she softened only slightly. "Case closed." Her gavel sounded with a decisive crack. David felt something inside him relax for the first time in days. Ranger nudged his hand, sensing the shift. As the audience clapped softly in approval, Elaine stood frozen, her face pale. For the first time, she looked like someone who finally realized her actions had limits and consequences. David didn't celebrate or smile. But he walked out of the courtroom with his head held high, Ranger by his side, knowing he hadn't just stood up for himself. He had stood up for every person like him who had ever been dismissed, belittled, or threatened by someone who believed their title placed them above decency. And the world had watched. The episode aired exactly 1 week after filming. David didn't plan to watch it at first. He didn't want to relive the humiliation, the confrontation, or Elaine's attempts to twist the truth. But as the broadcast time neared, neighbors began texting, veterans called, and even Tyler from the grocery store sent a nervous message, "We're all watching together at the store. You should too." So David sat down on the couch with Ranger curled beside him, remote in hand, and turned on the television. Seeing himself on screen was surreal. He watched the entire ordeal unfold from a viewer's perspective, the way he'd spoken calmly, the way Elaine had folded her arms in that dismissive manner, the way Judge Judy cut through every excuse with precision sharper than any blade. It felt vindicating, but sobering too. What played out on screen wasn't entertainment. It was his life, his dignity, and his identity as a veteran being disrespected by someone who thought his disability made him insignificant. Ranger nudged his side as if sensing his unease. "I'm okay, boy," he whispered, though part of him wasn't sure that was true. The episode sparked a reaction across the nation. Within hours, videos of Judge Judy reprimanding Elaine were circulating online. People shared clips of Judy saying, "This man wanted dog treats. You wanted superiority. You don't get to threaten someone because you think you're above them." The apology Judge Judy ordered came next. Elaine posted it on every platform she frequented, her official accounts, her personal accounts, even her rarely used charity page. In the video, she looked uncomfortable, her voice strained, but David noticed something different this time. She wasn't sneering. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't trying to project control. She simply read the prepared apology, acknowledging her actions and admitting she was in the wrong. It wasn't warm. It wasn't emotional. But it was direct. Honest enough. And for David, that was more than he'd expected from her. Maybe Judge Judy had gotten through to her in a way nothing else could. The donation she was ordered to make, to a program that trained service dogs for disabled veterans, was the biggest act of accountability she had ever been forced into. The foundation publicly thanked her, though everyone knew she hadn't donated out of kindness. But the money would still help people who needed it. That alone mattered. Even with these steps, the aftermath didn't disappear overnight. Senator Harrow eventually issued a separate statement, distancing himself from his wife's behavior without outright condemning it. Some viewed him as complicit for remaining silent initially. Others sympathized with him, saying he couldn't control his wife's actions. Political commentators debated whether the incident would affect his career. David didn't care about politics. All he cared about was the ripple effect. Strangers approached him in grocery stores to thank him for standing up. Disabled veterans sent letters describing their own experiences with discrimination. One man wrote, "You didn't just speak for yourself. You spoke for all of us who've been treated like we're invisible." Those words stayed with David. A week after the apology, Tyler from Willow Creek Market called again. "We're having a small gathering for the service dog fundraiser," he said. "It's informal. Just neighbors. We'd love for you to come." David didn't love gatherings. Crowds made him uneasy sometimes, old instincts from long nights in active zones overseas. But he also didn't want to hide. Ranger nudged his leg as if giving approval. So he agreed. When he arrived at the store, people clapped lightly. Not a wild applause, just a warm welcome. Tyler shook his hand firmly. "You handled everything with grace, David. We're proud of you." David felt his throat tighten, overwhelmed by the support. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, nor did he seek it. All he ever wanted was to be treated like anyone else. As he walked through the store, several children crouched to look at Ranger, their parents reminding them not to touch without permission. One little boy asked sheepishly, "Is he a real hero dog?" David smiled. "He's my partner. He keeps me steady." The boy nodded solemnly, as if absorbing something important. Later that evening, as David sat alone outside on his porch, Ranger resting at his feet, he reflected on how strange the past weeks had been. One moment he was buying dog treats, and the next he was caught in a storm that spread across the country. But through everything, anger, embarrassment, media attention, online debates, something significant had changed. Not in him, but in the people watching. Across town, across the country, even across the political lines that divided so many, people stood up for decency. For veterans. For disabled individuals. For basic respect. For service animals who worked tirelessly to protect and support those who needed them. He didn't start a movement. He didn't want one. But he became part of something bigger than himself, a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, had the right to belittle someone else. The night air was cool and filled with the soft hum of crickets. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves. Ranger lifted his head at the sound of a passing car, then relaxed again. David exhaled deeply, a weight finally lifting from his shoulders. The world could be cruel, unfair, and loud. But sometimes, it could be just. Sometimes, truth prevailed over status. Sometimes, people like Judge Judy, the ones willing to speak bluntly, honestly, and fearlessly, made sure of it. He scratched Ranger behind the ear. "We did all right, huh?" Ranger wagged his tail, pressing against him. For the first time since that awful day in the grocery store, David felt peace, not the fragile peace he'd learned to survive with, but a real, steady calm. The kind that came when justice wasn't just spoken, but acted upon. He stood, stretching his leg, and looked out at the quiet street where porch lights glowed warmly. Tomorrow would be ordinary again. No cameras. No reporters. No political advisors hovering with quiet threats. Just him, Ranger, and another day in Willow Creek. And that, he thought, was exactly enough.